Trauma Therapist Podcast Plus listeners can listen to episodes early and ad-free right now. Become a Plus listener by going to Apple Podcasts, searching for the Trauma Therapist Podcast, and signing up today. Welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast, a show about the incredible people dedicated to helping those who have experienced trauma. My name is Guy McPherson, and my mission is to raise the awareness of trauma and to inspire each of us to help those around us. Are you ready to do it?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the podcast. Very excited to have as my guests today, Gayle Long and Barbara Dehart. Ladies, welcome.
Thanks for having us. Super excited to be here.
Yes. Thank you, Guy.
You are welcome. So Gayle is a licensed marriage and family therapist and runs the Empowerment Center, where she provides psychotherapy, coaching, and mediation services. She's a co-author, along with Barbara, of A Year Without a Man, A Transformational Journey, which follows two women's explorations, failures and lessons learned through moments of clarity and confidence, relapses and lows, joys and heartbreak, and ultimately healing. It's a discovery that only through intentional commitment to live authentically can one begin to find themselves and see their life change forever. Barbara is a media and technology executive and co-author also of A Year Without a Man. She often speaks at women's events and facilitates workshops on women's empowerment, organizational and personal transitions, and creativity. Again, welcome. Thanks so much for being here. So before we get going, share with the listeners where each of you are from originally and where you are currently.
Well, I grew up down in Marin County, California. I've lived all over, but I've been in Nevada City, California, up in the foothills since 93.
Awesome. All right.
And I also reside in Nevada City, California, although I split my time with the San Francisco Bay Area and here. I'm born and raised in Sacramento, so I'm a Northern California girl through and through.
All right. Awesome. All right. So how did this start? I was thinking to myself when I was like, things connect with me. It's something about what you folks were doing connected with me. But let's talk to us. How did this book start? Who wants to start?
I can start. So
okay.
A Year Without a Man, really, well, as they say, hindsight is 20/20. And so looking back on the Year Without a Man, of course, it's much easier for us to see the trajectory of where we were at and where we went to. It really started in 2009 when Gayle and I had reconnected after many years of really not spending much time together, but living in the same community. And during that reconnection, we discovered that both of our lives had really become unmanageable. And that was in part due to relationships that we were engaged with, extramarital affairs that we were engaged with, and our lives were really crazy and there was a lot of suffering. So that was the beginning, and A Year Without a Man is really our journey from that experience.
All right, Gayle, I'm going to let you go, but let me just jump in here. So you both reconnect and you both were having at that time extramarital affairs. Yeah. No judgment here, but just interesting that you both were. Was this like, I'm having an affair, and just like, I'm having an affair too?
It's all in the book.
Oh my God.
We bond. We discovered that in one another, and that's how we truly bonded. And we were able to see the suffering that was reflected in the other. And, it's easier to see that when someone else is, having a really messed up time than it is to see it within yourself.
Yeah.
And then Barb had an amazing experience with a Sri Lankan medicine man, and I'll let her share that. And that's how we came to decided to make the decision to go A Year Without a Man.
Yeah. So Gayle and I reconnected. We spent a few months really spending a lot of time together and sharing our suffering. As Gayle said, we were each other's mirrors and were able to see how messed up a lot of our behavior really had become. We both have a ton of therapy and self-help under our belts, like literally a lifetime's worth or 2 lifetimes worth. And I had a medical crisis that had me off work and really wondering what was going on with my health. So the universe really did kind of slap me upside the head. And it happened to be at the same time I had a meeting with a Sri Lankan medicine man who was here, spending time with people and teaching them how to meditate and whatnot. And he put me on a 15-day meditation exercise, really to access my self-conscious and really be able to identify where I wanted to go. And it was through that process that I literally received the message. There's a big difference between thinking a thought and receiving a message. And it was through that process that I received this message that I needed to do a year without a man, and went for a hike the next day with Gayle. And she said, I'll do it with you. And that set us on this amazing journey of transformation that really we're still on today. But it was the genesis of the year.
I'm recently divorced, so 2 years ago. So there's a lot of this is like hitting home for me. But when you both reconnected, you said both of your lives were, I forget what the exact word was, but kind of in shambles. Things were not authentic. Talk more about that for each of you. What specifically, what was going on for you? What were you feeling?
I was in the midst of grad school and all the stress that was going along with that. My husband and I had the divorce conversation, but most people didn't know about it yet. Our kids didn't even know about it.
How long were you married? Had you been married, Gayle?
At that point, I want to say 23 years, so long-term marriage. But I was miserable, and I was obsessed with a married man and having
miserable. How? What does that mean?
Just really suffering, crying all the time, having obsessive thoughts over this man, thinking if only I could just be with this man, then everything will be okay.
Right.
And just miserable with the stress of going through a divorce, and also all the stress that goes along with being in grad school. And I was very out of alignment with my true authentic self. I don't do married men. This isn't who I am. And so the shame that went along with that, and the secrecy that goes along with that, and the obsessiveness that went along with it, that was causing me to suffer.
And I'd say that the obsessiveness is such a key point because, plus one to everything Gayle just said around my experience. High-tech career, traveling globally, raising 2 kids. My husband and I had separated, and I too was obsessed. It was the if-then thinking that was completely kind of derailing what normal behavior would be otherwise. And so that's when suffering occurs, right? It was a crazy time, which of course is what led to my medical crisis. And so it was tons of suffering, behavior that was unlike either of us, and the obsessive thoughts. That's what we would recognize in each other. So we would have these long conversations about how did we end up in this situation? We're both in the same situation. How do we end up in it? And when the other person was talking, we could see, and can we swear on this show? Yeah. We would say to each other, that's really fucked up. Like what you're saying right now is really fucked up. I can't tell you how many times that was the response, because we didn't recognize the behavior in ourselves, but because we had created this trusting, open, reflective relationship, we were able to reflect that back to the other. And that was really an important part of the journey for us, is having that safe place to have those discussions and have somebody reflect back what they're saying to you.
It's really interesting to me because I can identify with this. You have this incredible relationship between the two of you. And Barbara, you also were obsessed, to use your word, with another guy, some other guy.
The married man.
What was it? Why were you not able to live authentically in your relationship? Why were you both so miserable in it?
In our original relationships or marriages?
Yeah.
I think for me, it was a path that is not uncommon, right? You get married, you have children. At that point, my husband and I'd been married twice previously. And so it was with my second husband. And we had gone down this slow path of decreasing our communication, areas of interest, really looking elsewhere or looking outside of our partner for, enjoyment. I mean, we continue to operate as a family even well after we separated, but we didn't have an intimate relationship, right? We weren't each other's trusted source. And Elizabeth Gilbert's book, Committed, it's the book she wrote after Eat, Pray, Love. She talks about the walls and windows. And when you're in an open and trusting relationship, you have an open window between the two of you, or you're in an open-hearted stance and things flow easily back and forth. And as soon as someone else comes into the picture, what happens is you create a wall between you and your primary partner, and you open a window between you and this new person. And that's exactly what both of us did. It was that motion, and that image really stuck with me, because that's the thing we treasure and have to maintain in relationships. And I don't think either of us had the skills to do that at that point in our relationships.
Mm-hmm. How about for you, Gayle?
Mine was, I grew up with the belief that I needed a man to provide for me. And I ended up marrying a physician / psychiatrist. And there became pretty major issues with alcohol and drugs and other women, or I should say, an other woman. And I was just so resolved and, well, this is my life. I don't believe in divorce. I'm just going to forge it, just continue on. But I was miserable in that. I wasn't getting my needs met. I wasn't a priority. There was no sense of the we. There was a lack of trust. And so when I met this other man and all the chemicals started to flow, and he started to open up with me about his miserable marriage, it was just this immediate turn on. It's like, oh, yes. And so he and I bonded over our miserable marriages, and I began to fantasize how wonderful a life with him would be. And we began to plan that. But of course, it's like, we're going to do it the right way. We're not going to have sex. We're going to do it all above board. And we came up with a plan. And the plan was that we were both going to get divorced and wait a year and then date and then get back together. And of course, during the year, he ended up staying with his wife. And I don't know, at the end of the book, it says, well, my husband ended up dying the week that the world shut down due to COVID. We weren't speaking at that point. We were divorced, we were divorced at that point. And Mr. Married stayed married. And I learned throughout the year, I had a tremendous fear of being alone. And I believed that I could never let go of one relationship until I had another one to hold on to. And I think a lot of women can relate to that. That fear. And like Barb is quoted in the book saying, I don't know how to live in the world without a man in my life. And so by the end of the year, I had shifted all of that and got to that place, like they all say, I learned to love myself and find my own self-worth and self-love within me. And to this day, I'm happily single and still living on my own and running my private practice. And I'm okay. What was my greatest fear of being alone? I found out I was already alone. I was alone in my marriage and I was alone in the affair. So there really was nothing to fear.
It took you just a year to get to that space?
Oh, well,
My God, that sounds so quick. I wish I could get there.
It's a path. It's a journey, not a destination.
It is a journey, and it is. And I definitely relapsed. I 100% relapsed after the year and went right back out there. And then Barb was able to recognize that in me. And I was able to then, with her help, oh, yeah, I have fallen off the ledge again. And so I was able to, get back up, put my big girl panties back on and forge onward. No, it's a lifelong process. My heart is still a little bit guarded, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many topics within this broader scope subject that we're talking about here that I find really interesting. But let's get specifically to the book, how did you decide you were going to write a book? And talk to us about what you wanted to say in this book.
Well, as we went through the process, we were very intentional. As I said, 2 lifetimes worth of therapy and self-help extraordinaires, we were totally. And so when we went through the process, we set up a structure. We knew I've done a ton of transition management. And one of the things that we do when we're going through a big transition is we create temporary structures. And so Gayle and I set about this temporary structure. We would be each other's primary go-to person. We would be our travel partners. We were, we had a team of people that we relied on, our therapists, different types of therapists and body workers and spiritual guides and all of that. So it was an intentional process. And as we were going through the year and then all the years later, whenever we talk to people about it, they all say, oh, that would make a great book, or I need to read that book, or I know my daughter needs to read that book, or my boyfriend needs to read, or whatever, right? So we would hear constantly what a great story it would make. And so in 2014, I think was the first time we really set out we went through all of our journals. Gayle and I both are great journal, writers. And so it was helpful for us to have record really of what we were going through in that process. All of our calendars we went through, and we created a timeline and then started to put the story together. Then in 2018, we took another pass at it. Gayle has unfortunately had to go through breast cancer and multiple surgeries and that sort of thing. And so that took priority for us for a while. And then we got back to it in 2018. And then finally, after the year without a man, I ended up with the married man that I was having the affair with. We spent, more than a decade together, living a wonderful, fabulous, beautiful love story. And it was everything that I ever dreamt a really healthy, happy, functional relationship could be. Unfortunately, last year, he died out on his morning run.
Oh my
And
God.
so it was definitely a trauma. And it was after his death that we decided to revisit the story. He had read the book in 2018 and really wanted it to be published. And he thought the story could help a lot of people. And so Gayle and I, after his death, we took the next year and we reviewed everything and really got the book ready for publishing, and then published it on June 1st of this year, which happens to be the date that A Year Without a Man started, was June 1st. So that's kind of our anniversary date for freedom.
What specifically did you want to say in the book? Like, we need to say this. We want to say this. What was this?
2 things. One is to tell the story, because there's a lot that can be learned just from reading another story. So telling the story as it was in the most honest and vulnerable way that we could. And the second thing
But the
was
story of what?
Of the Year Without a Man, of why we did it, what it was like, and how we created a structure and a method to move through.
Okay. I guess I haven't gotten to clearly in my mind the point where you said we need to have this year without a man. What was, when you got there, what was that?
I would phrase it as it's the story of facing our fears of being alone, facing our fear of not having a man in our lives, and learning that we do have the strength within us to break free from that obsessive thoughts over men, thinking that we have to have a man in order to survive in this world. So it was breaking free from that, and in doing so, getting much closer to ourselves, finding ourselves, and helping each other through that process. And another thing I want to add is that a part of the year, we worked with Dr. David Nyland, who is an expert narrative therapist. And part of our sessions with him, they were 2-hour sessions, and one of us would go first and the other one would scribe verbatim what was being dialogued back and forth, and then we would switch at the end of the hour. And at the end of those sessions, several weeks after a session, we would get a letter from Dr. David. And sometimes the letter might be from an entity such as fear. So we received a letter: "Dear Barb and Gayle, I don't think you're going to get through this. You can't do this. How dare you think you can go a whole year without a man, without dating, without sex?" And, and then Fear would sign it. Fear and all of my friends, shame, blame, regret, guilt. And Barb would write back, basically, fuck you, Fear. We're doing this. And so because of those Dr. David letters, those were more documents we had that helped when it came time to write the book. We did not go into the year thinking, oh, we're going to do this year because we're going to write a book. The book evolved from our experience as we shared the process that we were going through. Many, many people said that would make a great book. And so, yes.
This idea of needing a man, I mean, it's and on one hand speaks to a previous generation, right? And what, the 40s, from probably when marriage started, women were led to believe that they need a man. And even to this day, I think there's some of that. But were you addressing that, or was there something beyond that?
I would say that what really the thing that's interesting about the Gayle and Barb story is that we come at the same problem from two totally different perspectives.
Right.
Gayle was raised in a 2-parent household where dad went to work every morning, came back for dinner at 6:35 every night, and had a very consistent, traditional family environment. Dad left when I was 2, abandoned me and the family when I was 2, never came back. So part of our journey was really uncovering those original wounds, not uncovering them because in therapy, of course, we'd identified original wounds and done our work on them. But this was different. This was really internalizing that journey of, for me, being abandoned by my dad when I was 2, he never came back. And that really, in my mind, set me on the trajectory. So we had our personal stories that were part of the path, but the other is all the social construct, right? We have a culture that is still to this day built around you grow up, you get married, you have kids, you retire, right? And so I think all of that led to us ending up on the path that we were on, which was a path of self-destruction at the point that we reconnected, when we discovered we were both having these extramarital affairs and we were both miserable, partly because of them.
Yeah, I think it's amazing that you found each other and reconnected again. Let me ask you, as we kind of wind down here, but during this journey, I want to ask each of you, what was the most challenging aspect of it for you personally?
Wow, that's a really good question. For me, my journey has been about my coping mechanism that I have created, in addition to always having a man in my presence or one coming or going, has been to be very independent, financially independent. I have a tech career. I live on my own. I do my own, I make my own choices. I financially secure all of that. So I had that coping mechanism. And my challenge was how to really access my heart, right? How to truly open my heart and have a relationship with all the parts of my psyche, with my physical body. But for me, it was truly about how to connect with a deep spiritual centered place in myself, connected to spirit, and how to find peace and solace in that place. And then everything in my life moving from that place has really been the transformation for me. It's like I have a home that's me. My home is within me. It's in my own heart. It's my own connection to spirit, and nobody else has to be involved in that relationship. So for me, that was the hardest thing and the most rewarding outcome of the journey.
And to do that, what did you have to do? I'm sure there were a lot of things, but what was some of the things you had to do?
Number one, take men off the table, right? Because I would literally go from, is that the one? Is that the one? If I wasn't dating someone, I had another one who was, coming into rotation. So I always made sure that I had somebody in my life. And And so that was the key, is
Like
taking
they were filling a gap for you.
100%.
Right. Okay. And how about for you, Gayle?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And the question was, what did I struggle with the most throughout the year?
Yeah.
I think it was, I really have to think about it. It was because that year for me really was a safety net. There was a gift in not having to worry about what men might be thinking of me or if I was out. It was so freeing to know that I didn't have to be on, if that makes sense. Like it does, if some guy asked me or wanted to buy me a drink or I would just be able to casually be like, thank you so much for asking, but no, I'm doing a year without a man. And it was just so freeing. So having that safety net of the year and having Barb there throughout the year, I think a challenge would have been the biggest challenge for me during the year was when Barb and I actually got into a fight. And I thought for a few days, I thought I might lose her. And I thought that the relationship and that terrified me more than anything, because I thought I can't do this without her. And so it's just hard. I think the year, it wasn't very challenging. It was fun. And because we had each other to do it, and all the structures and all the therapists and the traveling we did, which there's really funny stories about that in the book. So it wasn't the challenge for me, honestly, Guy, was when the year ended. The year ended. I lost the safety net. I thought that when the year was over, there'd be, applications waiting to date the amazing Gayle. And that did not happen. Plus, Mr. Married stayed married. And that was a very clear thing, that he was not an option. Greg had moved on with the woman that he had been having an affair with. And so I was truly alone when the year ended. And I think I needed more time, to be honest, and just went a little crazy. I call it Jenny on a ledge, like from Forrest Gump reference. And yeah.
As you talk about the book, what really continues to emerge is your relationship, the relationship you have with each other, which is really, really cool.
Yeah.
All right. Barbara, what's the best way for people to reach out and get in touch with you? Obviously, the book is called A Year Without a Man. Where can people get it, first off?
It's available at your local bookstores, and it's also available, of course, on Amazon.com. The best way to get in touch with us is at www.ayearwithoutaman.com. There's all kinds of information there, and there's ways to reach out to us directly there as well.
Okay. And we'll have that linked up here at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Gayle, do you want that also to be the way for people to reach out for you?
For sure. If it has anything to do with A Year Without a Man, then it's the www.ayearwithoutaman.com. If anybody would like to reach out to me personally or was interested in doing any type of counseling or coaching or therapy with me specifically, it would be Gayle, that's spelled Gayle, at GayleLong.com.
Okay. All right. We'll get that here. Awesome. All right, ladies. Thank you so much for being here. Really incredible story. I feel like there's a lot more I could talk about this topic, but I want to thank you so much for being here and taking the time.
Thanks, Guy. Thanks for having us.
All right. Take care.
Thank you so much, Guy.